I, 28F, stood at the front of the church, the weight of my son, Leo, a warm, comforting pressure in my arms. The scent of old wood, incense, and the faint, sweet smell of baby powder filled the air. My husband, Mark, 30M, was beside me. His hand rested lightly on my back, a silent anchor in a moment that was supposed to be one of the purest joys of our lives. The stained glass windows cast soft jewels of light across the stone floor. Father Michael smiled, his voice a gentle hum as he began the Rite of Baptism. He turned to my sister Clara, who stood on my other side. She was chosen to be the godmother. It had seemed like the natural choice, the right choice, a way to weave our families together even more tightly. Do you, as godparent, reject Satan and all his empty promises? Father Michael asked, his eyes kind. The silence that followed was small at first, a tiny crack in the serene atmosphere of the church. I thought perhaps she hadn't heard him. I glanced at her. Clara's face was a pale, tight mask. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the small, folded program. She wasn't looking at the priest. She was looking past me, her gaze fixed on my husband. Clara? The priest prompted gently. Her voice, when it came, was not a whisper. It was clear and sharp, a shard of glass in the quiet sanctuary. It sliced through the holy air and struck every person there. I can't, she said. Her eyes were still locked on Mark. I can't be godmother to his son. The words hung there, suspended in a thick, horrifying silence. Every head in the pews turned. I could feel the collective intake of breath from our family and friends. My mother's gasp was audible from the front row. Mark's hand on my back tensed, his fingers digging into my dress. Leo, sensing the sudden shift in the world, began to fuss in my arms, his tiny whimper a sound of protest against the awful tension. Father Michael stopped. His mouth was slightly open, his kind expression frozen in disbelief. The world seemed to stop with him. The light from the windows felt colder. The air felt thinner. My own heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. What was she doing? What was this? He was a man who had seen decades of human life unfold in this very church, from baptisms to weddings to funerals. He had likely heard every manner of confession and witnessed countless moments of family drama. But even he seemed utterly lost. He cleared his throat, his professional calm struggling to reassert itself. He looked from Clara's rigid form to my shocked face, then to Mark's, which had gone from confused to a dark, thunderous anger. Until finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. His voice was low, measured, an attempt to pull the ceremony back from the brink of disaster. Perhaps, he said, addressing the congregation but looking directly at my sister. We could ask the godparent to step aside for a moment if she is feeling unwell. It was a lifeline, a way out, a chance for Clara to retreat, to claim a sudden illness, to salvage something from the wreckage she had just created. I prayed she would take it. Just nod, I thought. Just step back and let this moment pass. We can deal with whatever this is later, in private. But Clara did not move. She didn't feign sickness. She simply stood her ground, a statue of righteous indignation. Her chin was high. She looked proud of what she had done. The silent refusal was her answer. She was not unwell. She was making a stand. That was the moment I knew this was not a mistake. It was not a slip of the tongue or a sudden crisis of faith. This was deliberate. This was an attack. The decision to ask Clara to be Leo's godmother had felt so simple at the time. She was my only sister. Growing up, we had been close, or at least that's how I remembered it. She was the older one, the dazzling one. She was smart and popular and always the center of attention. I was quieter, more content to be in her orbit. Our mother doted on her, celebrating her every achievement while my own were often met with a simple, pleasant nod. It never bothered me too much. That was just the way things were. Clara was the sun, and I was a planet that quietly circled her. When I met Mark, things began to shift. He saw me, not as Clara's little sister, but as me. He loved my quiet nature, my steady heart. He didn't try to change me or push me into the spotlight. He just made space for me to be myself. For the first time, I felt like my own center of gravity. Clara had never liked Mark. She was polite, of course. She was always perfectly, icily polite. But she made her disapproval known in 1,000 tiny ways. A backhanded compliment about his job in logistics, which she called moving boxes around. A subtle jab at his family, who were simpler, warmer, and less concerned with appearances than ours. She would ask him pointed questions at family dinners, trying to trip him up, to expose some flaw that only she could see. Mark, to his credit, was always patient. He would answer her calmly, refusing to be drawn into her games. "She just needs time to get used to me," he had said early on in our relationship. "She's protective of you." I had wanted to believe that. I had made excuses for her. "She's just stressed with work." She doesn't mean it that way. That's just Clara's sense of humor. I was so used to smoothing over her sharp edges that I did it automatically, even when her barbs were aimed at the man I loved. When Leo was born, I thought things would finally change. A baby was supposed to bring everyone together. When I asked Clara to be the godmother, I saw it as an olive branch, a way to finally, formally welcome Mark into the family and solidify our new reality. I was a wife and a mother now. We were a unit. She had accepted with a smile. "Of course," she had said, hugging me. "I would be honored." There had been no hint of what was to come, no warning. She had helped me plan the reception. She had bought Leo a beautiful, expensive silver rattle. She had played the part of the devoted aunt perfectly. All of it, I now realized, had been a performance. A long, elaborate setup for this single moment of public humiliation. Back in the church, Father Michael finally broke the stalemate. He looked at the other godparent, Mark's best friend, David, who looked as horrified as everyone else. "David, are you prepared to take on the responsibilities of a godparent alone? Should it be necessary?" he asked. David nodded, his face pale. "Yes, Father, I am." "Very well," the priest said, his voice firm now. He turned to me and Mark. "The church recognizes one godparent is sufficient for the sacrament. We shall proceed." He did not look at Clara again. He had dismissed her. My mother made a small, strangled noise from the front pew. I didn't dare look at her. I couldn't. I had to focus on my son, on getting through this. I rocked Leo gently, whispering to him, trying to soothe him, but I was really trying to soothe myself. My hands were shaking. Mark's arm came around me, pulling me and our son closer to him. His strength was the only thing holding me up. We stumbled through the rest of the ceremony. The words of the baptism, meant to be about new life and grace, felt hollow and distant. Every prayer was punctuated by the silent, glaring presence of my sister, who had not moved. She stood there, a few feet away, watching us. When Father Michael poured the holy water over Leo's head, my son cried out, and I felt a tear slide down my own cheek. It was supposed to be a tear of joy. Instead, it was one of shame and anger and a profound, bottomless confusion. The reception afterwards was a nightmare. It was held in the church hall, a cheerful room with balloons and a beautifully decorated cake that now seemed like a cruel joke. People tried to act normal, but the tension was a physical presence in the room. Whispers followed us as we moved. People would come up to congratulate us, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They would hug me, then their gaze would flicker over my shoulder, searching for Clara. She was holding court in a corner with my mother. My mother was stroking her arm, murmuring to her, comforting her. Comforting the person who had just detonated a bomb in the middle of my life. My father stood nearby, looking lost and grim. He caught my eye once and gave me a helpless shrug. Mark was a shadow of himself. The joy had been stolen from him. He held Leo, his face a mask of fury. He was trying to keep it together for me, for our guests, but I could feel the rage radiating from him. "I'm going to talk to her," he said, his voice a low growl. "No," I said, putting a hand on his arm. "Let me." This was my sister, my family. This was my mess to try and understand. I walked over to the corner where Clara and my mother stood. As I approached, the small circle of relatives around them fell silent and melted away, leaving the three of us alone. "What was that, Clara?" I asked. My voice was surprisingly steady. I felt strangely calm, the way you do in the eye of a storm. Clara didn't look at me. She took a delicate sip of her champagne. "I think it was perfectly clear," she said. "No," I said. "It wasn't. You owe me an explanation. You owe Mark an explanation." My mother jumped in, her voice frantic and placating. "Now, honey, not here. Clara is very upset. We can talk about this later." "Upset?" I said, my voice rising. "She's upset? She just humiliated my husband and me in front of our entire family and all of our friends during our son's christening, and she's the one who's upset?" "You don't understand," my mother said, her hand fluttering at her chest. "She has her reasons." "Then I'd like to hear them," I said, turning my gaze back to my sister. "Tell me, Clara, tell me the reasons." Clara finally met my eyes. Her expression was cold, almost smug. "I did it to protect you," she said. My laugh was short and bitter. "Protect me? From what? From my own husband? From a beautiful day with our son?" "You're so naive," she said, shaking her head with theatrical pity. "You have no idea who you married." The accusation was so outrageous, so baseless, that I was momentarily speechless. I looked at her, at this woman I had known my entire life, and I felt like I was seeing a stranger. The sister I thought I knew, the one who could be difficult and demanding but who I believed loved me, was gone. In her place was someone cruel and calculating. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "I'm not going to discuss it here," she said, glancing around the room. "But I will not stand by and watch you and your son be tied to a man like that. I have a responsibility as your sister, and I certainly will not stand up in a church and make promises to God on behalf of his child." The emphasis on his child was another twist of the knife. As if Leo was only Mark's, not mine. As if I were just a vessel, a foolish girl who had been tricked. "A man like what?" I pressed, my voice shaking with rage now. "What kind of man is Mark? Tell me, tell everyone." "Sarah, stop it," my mother hissed, grabbing my arm. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" I wrenched my arm away. She's the one who stood up in the middle of a holy sacrament and refused to participate. She's the one who implied my husband is some kind of monster. And I'm the one making a scene? Clara just smiled a small, tight smile. "If you don't know, I can't help you," she said. "Maybe you should ask your husband. Ask him what he's been hiding from you." With that, she placed her empty champagne flute on a nearby table, turned and walked out of the hall. My mother, after a moment of panicked hesitation, scurried after her. I stood there, frozen. The whispers in the room grew louder. I felt dozens of pairs of eyes on me. The beautiful cake, with its blue icing and block letters spelling out, "God bless Leo," seemed to mock me. The party was over. My sister had made sure of that. We left soon after. We cut the cake, packed up a few slices, and thanked people for coming with forced smiles and hollow words. The drive home was silent. I sat in the back with Leo, who had finally fallen asleep in his car seat. Mark drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The silence in the car wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, filled with unasked questions and the poison my sister had so carefully injected into our lives. When we got home, Mark carried a sleeping Leo upstairs and put him in his crib. I went into the kitchen and stood by the window, looking out at the dark street. I felt numb. I replayed the scene in the church over and over in my mind. Clara's voice, the look on her face. Her words. His son. A man like that. Ask him what he's been hiding from you. It was a classic manipulation tactic. She hadn't accused him of anything specific. She had just planted a seed of doubt, a vague and terrifying insinuation, and then walked away, leaving me to tear my own life apart looking for answers. Mark came into the kitchen. He stood behind me, not touching me. I could feel his hurt and his anger like a physical heat. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough. "I swear to you, I have no idea what she is talking about." I turned to face him. I looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception, any shadow of a hidden secret. I saw nothing but the same confusion and pain that I felt. "I believe you," I said, and I did. But a tiny, insidious voice in the back of my mind whispered, "But what if? What if there's something?" That was Clara's victory. She had managed to get inside my head. She had taken one of the happiest days of our lives and turned it into the beginning of a nightmare. And the worst part was, I had no idea why. The next day, the phone calls started. First, my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. She was a kind, no-nonsense woman who had always been a neutral party in our family's dynamics. "Sarah, are you all right?" she asked, her voice full of genuine concern. "I don't know what I am, Aunt Carol," I admitted, my voice thick. "What your sister did was unforgivable," she said, and the validation felt like a cool cloth on a fevered brow. "Your mother is trying to spin it, saying Clara was just overwhelmed, but I saw her face. That was planned." "I know," I whispered. "But why? What did she say to you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "She's been saying things for a while now," my aunt said hesitantly. "Little comments here and there, about Mark, that you don't really know him, that he has secrets." "What secrets?" I asked, my heart starting to pound again. "She never said anything specific," Aunt Carol replied. "It was all hints and whispers. There are things Sarah doesn't know about his past. He's not the man everyone thinks he is." I told her to stop being so dramatic, but she just gave me that look. You know the one that says she knows better than everyone else. I did know the one. I had been on the receiving end of that condescending look my entire life. "She's trying to poison everyone against him," I said, the reality of it settling in my stomach like a stone. "It seems that way," my aunt agreed. "I don't know why, Sarah. Maybe she's jealous. You have a wonderful husband and a beautiful baby. You're happy. Sometimes that's enough to make miserable people act out." After we hung up, I thought about what she said. Jealousy. It seemed too simple, too petty, to explain the level of cruelty Clara had displayed. This wasn't just a snide remark at a family dinner. This was a public execution of my husband's character on a sacred day. There had to be more to it. My mother called next. Her tone was completely different. It was brisk, managerial, as if she were handling a minor scheduling conflict. "Sarah, I've spoken with Clara," she began, without any preamble. "She's feeling much better now. I think the best thing is for you and Mark to come over for dinner on Sunday, and we can all put this behind us." I was stunned into silence. Put this behind us? As if it were a spilled glass of wine? "Mom, are you serious?" I finally managed to say. "Of course I'm serious," she said, a note of irritation in her voice. "We're a family. We don't let these little squabbles fester. Clara is willing to forgive you for making a scene at the reception." I actually laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "She's willing to forgive me?" "Mom, did you hear what happened in the church? Did you hear what she said?" "She was emotional," my mother insisted, her voice rising. The pressure of being a godmother was too much for her. "She has concerns about Mark, and she expressed them poorly. She's worried about you." "She's not worried about me," I shot back. "She's trying to destroy my marriage. She implied my husband is some kind of criminal or a liar. And you're defending her." "I'm not defending her," she said, though that was exactly what she was doing. "I'm trying to keep this family together. You're being very stubborn, Sarah. Clara is your sister. She loves you. Love doesn't look like that, Mom, I said, my voice cold. Love doesn't humiliate you in a church. Love doesn't try to turn you against your husband. Whatever that was, it wasn't love. You're being hysterical, she snapped. You need to think about what's best for this family. I am, I said quietly. I'm thinking about my family. Me, Mark, and Leo. And until Clara can give Mark a sincere, heartfelt apology, she is not welcome in our home, and we will not be coming for dinner on Sunday. I hung up before she could reply. My hand was shaking. It was one of the first times in my life I had ever stood up to my mother so forcefully. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. A line had been drawn. That evening, Mark and I sat down after Leo was asleep. We needed to talk. Really talk. My aunt said Clara has been spreading rumors about you for weeks, I told him. Vague things about you having secrets. Mark ran a hand through his hair, his face etched with frustration. Secrets? What secrets? My life is an open book. You know everything about me. I'm a logistics manager. I like to watch football and build furniture in the garage. What dark, mysterious past does she think I have? I don't know, I said. But her final words to me at the reception were, ask him what he's been hiding from you. She's trying to make me doubt you. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. Is it working? The question hung in the air between us. I had to be honest. A small part of me is scared, I admitted. Not because I think you've done something terrible, but because I don't understand the attack. It feels so personal. Is there anything, Mark? Anything at all from your past that she could have found and twisted? He was quiet for a long time, staring at the floor. My heart began to beat faster. Oh no, I thought. There is something. Finally, he looked up at me, his face full of shame. There is one thing, he said slowly. It's not a secret. Not really. It's just something I'm not proud of. I never told you because it was a failure, and I was embarrassed. I held my breath. Before I got into logistics, he began, right out of college, I started a small tech company with my best friend at the time, a guy named David. We had this great idea for an app. We poured everything we had into it. My savings, his savings, a small loan from my parents. He paused, the memory clearly painful. We were young and stupid. We didn't know anything about running a business. We made a lot of mistakes. The app launched and it was a total flop. We lost everything. My parents' money, our savings, everything. Oh, Mark, I said softly, my heart aching for him. The worst part was David. He continued, his voice low. He took it really hard. He'd put his inheritance from his grandparents into it. He blamed me. He said I was reckless, that I pushed too hard. We had a huge, terrible fight. We said things we shouldn't have. We haven't spoken since. It was over 8 years ago. He looked at me, his expression pleading. I'm so ashamed of it, Sarah. I felt like such a failure. When I met you, I just wanted to be the steady, reliable guy. The guy who could provide for you. I didn't want you to see me as the kid who lost all his money and his best friend. I reached out and took his hand. It was cold. Mark, that's not a dark secret. That's a painful life experience. It's something that happened to you. It doesn't change who you are. But maybe it's what Clara found, he said, his voice desperate. Maybe she somehow found David and he told her some twisted version of the story, made me sound like some kind of con man. The thought was chilling. It was plausible. Clara worked in marketing and was incredibly skilled at digging up information on people and competitors. It was literally part of her job. How would she even know about David? I asked. I don't know, he said, shaking his head. I've never mentioned him to your family. Maybe she went through my old social media? Or maybe she just started digging into my past, looking for anything she could use. The idea of my sister actively investigating my husband, searching for dirt to use against him, made me feel sick. This went far beyond jealousy. This was a calculated, malicious campaign. Okay, I said, my voice hardening with a new resolve. This is what we're going to do. We're going to find out for sure. We need to know what she knows or what she thinks she knows. The first step was to try and get something concrete from Clara herself. I knew a direct confrontation would be useless. She would just deny everything and call me hysterical again. I needed a different approach. I needed to pretend to be on her side, just for a moment, to see what she would reveal. A few days later, I called her. I took a deep breath and forced a note of weary confusion into my voice. Clara, I said, I've been thinking about what you said. Oh? Her voice was wary, but I could hear a flicker of interest. I'm so confused, I said, letting my voice crack a little. You said I should ask Mark about what he's hiding. I did. We had a long talk. I let the silence hang there, waiting for her to take the bait. And? She prompted, unable to resist. He told me everything. I lied. And you were right. I had no idea. I feel so stupid. There was a triumphant pause on the other end. I told you, Sarah, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I was only trying to protect you. It's a terrible situation. It is, I agreed. But Clara, I need to know. How did you find out? How did you know about the business partner? I threw the phrase out there, a calculated guess based on what Mark had told me. Her reaction was immediate. There was a sharp intake of breath. She was surprised that I knew the specific angle she was working. So he did tell you about David, she said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. She had just confirmed Mark's suspicion. She knew the name. Yes, I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger surging through me. He told me, but he was very vague. I feel like he wasn't telling me the whole story. You seem to know more. What did David tell you? This was the crucial part. I was hoping she would gloat, that she would spill the details of her supposed investigation, but she was too clever for that. I don't think it's right for me to get in the middle of this, Sarah, she said, suddenly prim and proper. This is between you and your husband. I just opened your eyes to the truth. What you do with it is up to you. You need to ask yourself if you can really trust a man who would lie about something so significant. A man who ruined his best friend's life. Ruined his life? I repeated. Is that what David said? I'm not going to betray a confidence, she said loftily. All I'm saying is that you need to be careful. A man's past defines his character. She had given me what I needed. She had confirmed the subject was David. And she had revealed the narrative she was pushing. That Mark was not just a failure, but a malicious actor who had ruined someone's life and then covered it up. It was a vile, poisonous lie, built on a kernel of truth. Thank you, Clara, I said, my voice dripping with fake gratitude. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm always here for you, little sister, she said. I hung up the phone and my hands were trembling with rage. She was enjoying this. She was actively trying to break up my family, and she was reveling in it. I told Mark about the conversation. He was devastated. She's twisting it into something ugly, he said, his voice hoarse. David and I both lost money. I didn't ruin his life. The business failed. It happens. I know, I said, putting my arms around him. And she knows it too. This isn't about the truth. This is about control. She wants to control me and she sees you as an obstacle. So what do we do now? He asked. Now, I said, a cold, hard certainty solidifying in my chest. We find David. We need to hear his side of the story directly. And we need to find out exactly what he told Clara. Finding David was harder than I expected. He wasn't on any of the major social media platforms. Mark had lost his number years ago. It took me 2 days of dedicated searching online, going through old university alumni networks and professional sites, before I finally found a profile that matched. He was a project manager for a construction company in a city 3 states away. There was an email address listed. My heart pounded as I wrote the email. I kept it simple and direct. Dear David, my name is Sarah, and I am Mark's wife. I know you two haven't spoken in a long time, but something has happened, and I believe you may be able to help clear it up. It's a very sensitive family matter. Would you be willing to speak with me for a few minutes? I would be incredibly grateful. I sent it and tried to put it out of my mind, but it was impossible. I checked my phone every 5 minutes. The waiting was agony. What if he didn't reply? What if he was still so angry at Mark that he wouldn't help? Or worse, what if he was the one feeding Clara these lies? 2 days later, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was David. My hands shook as I opened it. Sarah, I'll be honest, this is the last email I ever expected to get. A lot of water under the bridge with Mark. But I'm not an unreasonable person. Here's my number. You can call me this evening after 7 p.m. I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy. That evening, I waited until Leo was asleep. Mark sat with me in the living room, holding my hand as I dialed the number. A man's voice, calm and measured, answered on the second ring. This is David. Hi, David. This is Sarah, Mark's wife. I began, my voice a little shaky. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. No problem, he said. So, what's going on? Is Mark okay? The question surprised me. It was a normal, concerned question. Not the tone of a man who believed Mark had ruined his life. He's fine, I said. But something happened. David, I need to ask you a very strange question. Have you by any chance spoken to my sister Clara in the last few months? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I held my breath. Clara? He said slowly, testing the name. Yeah, I did. About 4 months ago, I think. She called me at work. How do you know about that? My heart started to pound. This was it. What did she say to you? What did you talk about? It was weird, to be honest. He said. She told me she was a freelance journalist doing a piece on failed tech startups from the late 2000s. She said she found my name on an old business filing connected to the company Mark and I started. She wanted to interview me about my experience. A journalist. The lie was so audacious, so completely in character for Clara. She had created a whole false identity to justify her snooping. And what did you tell her? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. I told her the truth, David said with a shrug in his voice. I told her we were two ambitious kids who got in over our heads. We made some bad calls, the market wasn't great, and the whole thing went under. I told her we both lost a lot of money and that it ended our friendship, which was a shame. I was pretty candid about my own mistakes in the whole thing. I felt a surge of validation. So you didn't tell her that Mark tricked you, or stole from you, or maliciously ruined your life? David laughed, a short, sharp sound. What? No, where would she get a crazy idea like that? Mark was a terrible businessman back then, but so was I. He was never malicious. He was just in over his head. He lost his parents' money in that deal. Trust me, he was just as devastated as I was. The relief was so immense, I felt lightheaded. Mark squeezed my hand, his eyes wide. He had heard everything on speakerphone. Then David, I said, this is going to sound even weirder. Why did you call her back later? He sounded confused. What do you mean? I never called her back. We had that one 20-minute conversation. She thanked me for my time, and that was it. I never heard from her again. She told someone, I said carefully, that you had called her back very upset to tell her more things about Mark, things that were much worse. That's an absolute lie, David said, his voice sharp with indignation now. I never did that. Why would I? After we hung up, I felt kind of bad for Mark, to be honest. It felt weird, a stranger digging up that old failure. It never even crossed my mind to call her back. He paused for a moment. Wait a minute. This journalist? Clara, you said? Your sister? What's this really about? She wasn't a journalist, was she? The time for subtlety was over. I told him everything. I told him about the christening, about Clara's public declaration, about her accusations against Mark, and about her campaign to poison our family against him. I told him how she was using their shared past as a weapon to destroy my marriage. He was silent for a long time after I finished. When he spoke again, his voice was cold with anger. "That is unbelievable," he said. "She twisted a sad story about two friends who failed at a business into this? She used me to try and ruin his life now? After all these years?" "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what she did." "That's messed up," he said, his voice low. "Look, Sarah, Mark and I had a bad falling out. I was angry for a long time, but that was years ago. We were kids. What your sister is doing is a whole different level of wrong. She lied to me to get information, and then she lied about what I said to hurt him." "I know," I said. "And I'm so sorry you were dragged into this." "Don't be sorry," he said, his voice firm. "I'm glad you called. Is there anything I can do to help? Do you need me to write an email or call her or anything?" An idea began to form in my mind. A risky, dramatic idea. But it felt like the only way to truly end this. Clara had built her entire attack on a foundation of lies. The only way to win was to demolish that foundation in front of everyone she had tried to manipulate. "David," I said, "there is something you can do, but it's a big ask." It was time to set the stage. A few days later, I called my mother. "Mom," I said, my voice calm and neutral, "Mark and I have been talking, and we've decided that you're right. We need to resolve this as a family. We'd like to host a dinner this Sunday. You, Dad, and Clara. Just the 5 of us. It's time to clear the air." My mother's relief was palpable. "Oh, Sarah, that's wonderful news. I knew you'd see sense. I'll tell Clara. She'll be so pleased. This is the right thing to do." I felt a pang of guilt for deceiving her, but it was quickly replaced by a cold resolve. This wasn't about seeing sense in her way. This was about finally bringing the truth to light, in a way that no one could ignore or explain away. The week leading up to the dinner was one of the most stressful of my life. Mark and I were a team, united in our plan, but the anxiety was a constant hum beneath the surface of our days. We went through the motions of work, of caring for Leo, of normal life, but our minds were on Sunday. Clara, I was sure, would be walking into our home expecting a victory lap. She would assume her campaign had worked, that she had successfully driven a wedge between me and Mark, and that I was now coming to her, broken and seeking her guidance. She would be preparing a speech full of false concern and "I told you so's." She had no idea she was walking into an ambush. Sunday arrived. I spent the day cooking, the simple, methodical tasks of chopping vegetables and stirring sauces helping to calm my nerves. Mark played with Leo, his laughter a comforting sound in the house. We were a family, we were strong, and we were going to fight for that. My parents and Clara arrived at 6 o'clock. My mother was beaming, carrying a bottle of wine. My father looked relieved, but still wary. And Clara had an air of smug triumph about her. She gave me a hug that was pure performance. "I'm so glad you decided to do this, Sarah," she whispered in my ear. "It's for the best." I just smiled and led them into the living room. We made small talk for a few minutes. The tension was thick, but my mother chattered on nervously, trying to fill the silence. Mark was quiet, polite, his face unreadable. We sat down to dinner. I served the food. The clinking of silverware on plates was the only sound for a while. Finally, I put down my fork and looked at Clara. "Clara," I began, my voice even. "We're here to clear the air, so I want you to tell me and tell Mom and Dad exactly what your concerns are about Mark. You made a very public accusation in the church. Now is the time to explain it. In detail." My mother immediately tried to intervene. "Sarah, maybe we don't need to rehash." "No, Mom," I said, cutting her off firmly but gently. "We do. I need to understand. We all do." I turned my gaze back to my sister. Please, Clara, tell us. Clara dabbed her mouth with her napkin, composing herself. She was in her element now. She had the stage. All right, she said, sighing as if this were a great burden. I didn't want to do this, but you forced my hand. Sarah, I love you. And because I love you, I cannot stand by and watch you be deceived. She looked at Mark with a pitying expression. Mark, I'm sure you're not a bad person at heart, but you have been fundamentally dishonest with my sister. You hid your past from her. A past that involves incredible failure and hurting people. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. What are you talking about, Clara? I'm talking about his first business, Clara announced. The one he started with his best friend David. The one where he lost all of David's inheritance and ruined his life and then cut off all contact, leaving David to pick up the pieces. She delivered the lines with practiced gravity. She looked at me, expecting to see shock and hurt on my face. You see, Sarah, she continued, pressing her advantage. It's not just that the business failed. It's the dishonesty. He lied to you by omission. What else is he hiding? That's my concern. His character is flawed. I let her finish. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. My mother was looking at Mark with horrified eyes. My father looked confused. Wow, I said softly. That's quite a story. It sounds terrible. You must have been so worried. I was, Clara said, nodding sagely. I am. And you got all this information from David himself, is that right? I asked. Yes, she said, her chin high. After our initial conversation, he was so distraught that he called me back. He told me everything. He was very emotional. He told me how Mark's recklessness destroyed him financially and emotionally. She was lying so smoothly, so effortlessly. It was chilling. That's fascinating, I said, because David tells a very different story. Clara's smile faltered. What are you talking about? I know you told him you were a journalist, Clara, I said, my voice still quiet. I know you lied to get him to talk to you. And I know he never called you back. The color drained from her face. That's ridiculous. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think I do, I said. I reached for my phone, which was sitting on the table beside me. You see, I was so concerned about all of this that I thought it was best we all hear it from the source, to avoid any more misunderstandings. I tapped the screen. A man's voice, clear and strong, filled the silent room. Is this thing on? It was David's voice. He was on a video call. I turned the phone around so everyone at the table could see him. He was sitting in what looked like a home office. Hello, David, I said. Thank you for joining us. Clara stared at the phone as if it were a snake. She was completely frozen. No problem, Sarah, David said, his expression grim. He looked directly at the camera. Hello, Clara. My mother gasped. Who is this? This is David, I explained calmly. Mark's old business partner. The one whose life was supposedly ruined. I looked at my sister. Clara, would you like to repeat the story you just told us for David? About how he called you back, crying, to tell you how Mark destroyed him? Clara couldn't speak. She just stared, her mouth opening and closing silently. David spoke into the silence. Clara, I've never called you in my life. We had one conversation where you lied and told me you were a journalist. I told you that Mark and I were young, we made mistakes, and the business failed. I never said he ruined my life. That is a complete fabrication. You twisted my words and you invented a phone call that never happened. I'd like to know why. The accusation, coming directly from him, was irrefutable. There was nowhere for her to hide. My father turned to look at her, his face dark with anger. Clara? Is this true? Did you lie about all of this? Clara finally found her voice. It was a high, panicked squeak. He's lying. They're all in on it together. They're trying to make me look bad. Why would I lie? David asked, his voice cutting through her hysteria. I have no reason to. I haven't spoken to Mark in 8 years. I have no dog in this fight. But I'm not going to be used as a pawn in your weird, sick game to destroy your sister's marriage. This is insane, Clara shrieked, pushing her chair back. I was trying to protect her. Protect me from what? I asked, my voice rising to match hers. From a happy marriage? From a man who loves me? You weren't protecting me, Clara. You were jealous. You couldn't stand that I was happy, that I had a life that didn't revolve around you. So you decided to burn it to the ground. I stood up, my whole body trembling with adrenaline and rage. You dug into my husband's past, looking for a weapon. You found a painful memory and you twisted it into something ugly and monstrous. You lied to me. You lied to our family. You lied to David. And you did it all with a smile on your face, pretending to be the concerned, loving sister. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. And the christening, I said, my voice breaking. You chose our son's christening to do it. You stood up in a church in front of God and everyone we love, and you tried to destroy my family. For what? So you could be the center of attention again? So you could be the hero who saved me? Clara was cornered. The lies were all exposed. She looked from my face to my father's angry one, to my mother's, which was a mess of confusion and dawning horror. She did the only thing she could do. She attacked. You always do this, she screamed at me. You twist everything to make me the villain. I've spent my whole life looking out for you, and this is the thanks I get? You choose him over your own sister. There was no choice to be made until you created one. I yelled back. You forced this. You declared war on my husband, on my family. That's enough. My father's voice boomed across the table. He stood up, his face flushed with a rare and terrible anger. He looked at Clara, and for the first time I saw no trace of his usual indulgence for his favored daughter. I saw only disgust. You will apologize, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You will apologize to Sarah. You will apologize to Mark. And you will apologize to this man, he gestured to the phone, for lying and using him. Clara stared at him, her mouth agape. She had never been spoken to like that by him in her entire life. I will not, she spat. I did nothing wrong. Then you can get out of this house, my father said, his voice like ice. And you can think long and hard about what you've done. Clara looked at my mother, her eyes pleading for support, for her usual ally to step in and smooth things over. But my mother was just staring at the phone, at David's face, the living proof of her daughter's calculated cruelty. She looked broken. She said nothing. Realizing no one was coming to her rescue, Clara's face crumpled into a mask of pure fury. She grabbed her purse. Fine, she shrieked. I don't need this. I don't need any of you. She stormed out of the dining room. A moment later, we heard the front door slam shut. The silence she left behind was profound. I sank back into my chair, my entire body shaking. Mark came to my side, his arm wrapping around me. On the phone, David cleared his throat. I hope that helped, Sarah, he said quietly. It did, I whispered, tears of relief now mixing with the angry ones. Thank you, David. I can't tell you how much. You don't have to, he said. Take care of yourself. And Mark, it's good to see you, man. I'm sorry about all this. You too, David, Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. We said our goodbyes and I ended the call. My father sat down heavily. He looked old and tired. I am so sorry, Sarah. Mark, I had no idea. I never imagined. He trailed off, shaking his head. My mother was still silent, tears rolling down her cheeks. She was crying not for me, I realized, but for the destruction of the perfect family image she had tried so hard to maintain. She was crying for Clara. The fallout began the very next morning. My father called me. His voice was somber. I spoke with your mother all night, he said. She's still trying to make excuses for Clara, saying she's troubled and needs our support. I told her that what Clara needs is professional help, and what you and Mark need is space. What did she say? I asked. She didn't like it, he admitted, but I was firm. I told her that I will not pretend that what Clara did was okay. I will not rug sweep this. She showed a capacity for cruelty that I find staggering. I told your mother that our priority right now should be supporting you. Hearing my father say those words, hearing him finally, unequivocally take my side, was a balm on a wound I hadn't even realized was so deep. For my entire life, I had been the second-place child. To have him stand up as my champion felt like the world shifting on its axis. Thank you, Dad, I said, my voice choked with emotion. That means more to me than you know. I'm your father, Sarah, he said gruffly. It's my job. I've just been doing it poorly for a while. I'm going to do better. A few days later, as expected, my mother called. Her tone was the one she used when she was deeply disappointed in me, as if I had failed a test. Your sister is a complete mess, she said, her voice sharp with accusation. She won't leave her apartment. She won't answer my calls. This has destroyed her. I took a deep breath, refusing to be drawn into her guilt trip. Mom, what Clara did destroyed a beautiful day for our family. It was cruel and calculated. She is the one who needs to fix this, not me. You're tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding, she cried, her voice rising. The line was so absurd, so dismissive of the truth, that it clarified everything for me. My mother was not capable of seeing Clara's actions for what they were. She was a permanent enabler, and she would always choose protecting Clara's fragile ego over protecting me. No, Mom, I said, my voice cold and clear. Clara did that when she stood up in that church. She tore the family apart. You just have to decide which side of the rubble you want to stand on. But if you choose to stand with the person who intentionally tried to hurt me and my husband, then you are choosing to stand on the other side from me, Mark, and your grandson. The silence on the other end was heavy with her shock and indignation. I had never spoken to her like that before. I had laid down an ultimatum. I can't believe you, she finally whispered, her voice full of theatrical pain. Believe it, I said. The door to our home is open to you and Dad whenever you want to see Leo, but it is closed to Clara. And if you spend your time with us making excuses for her or trying to pressure me into a reconciliation, that door will close for you too. The choice is yours. I hung up. It felt like severing a rope that had been chafing my skin for 28 years. It hurt, but it was also a profound relief. I called my best friend, Maya, and told her everything that had happened, from the dinner to the phone calls with my parents. She had been my rock through this whole ordeal, the one person outside the family I could talk to without filter. Wow, she said after I finished. So you basically fired your sister and put your mom on probation. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. I guess I did. Good for you, she said, her voice fierce with support. You did the right thing. You protected your pack. Mark and Leo are your pack now. Anyone who tries to hurt them has to go through you. That's how it's supposed to be. Her words solidified my resolve. I had spent so much of my life trying to keep the peace, trying to smooth things over, trying not to rock the boat. I had mistaken that for kindness. But true kindness wasn't letting people hurt the ones you love. True kindness was setting boundaries. True kindness was protecting your own heart and the hearts of your family. Life settled into a new kind of normal, a quieter normal. My father started visiting on his own once a week to see Leo. Our conversations were a little awkward at first as we navigated this new dynamic, but they were also more honest than they had ever been. He told me he and my mother were in counseling. He was trying to get her to understand the damage that had been done, but it was slow progress. He never pressured me about Clara. He just showed up, played with his grandson, and told me he was proud of me. Mark and I were closer than ever. The fire we had walked through together had forged our bond into something unbreakable. The last remnants of shame he felt about his past failure were gone, replaced by the righteous anger of a man who had been unjustly attacked. He saw with perfect clarity that Clara's actions had nothing to do with him and everything to do with her own brokenness. A few months after the dinner, we held a small private ceremony in our backyard. We asked Maya to be Leo's godmother. It was just us, Maya, her husband, and my father. It was simple and quiet and filled with a genuine love that had been absent from the grand, formal christening. As Maya held Leo and promised to love and guide him, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was right. This was what a family celebration should feel like. One evening, about 6 months after the christening, a letter arrived. It was addressed to me in Clara's familiar looping handwriting. My first instinct was to throw it away, unopened. But Mark encouraged me to read it. "You don't have to reply," he said, "but maybe you need to read it for your own closure." So I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it. It was 4 pages long. It was not an apology. It was a long, rambling, self-pitying tirade. It was full of accusations. I had been a difficult, ungrateful sister. I had never appreciated all she did for me. I had always been jealous of her. Mark had brainwashed me against my own family. My father had betrayed her. My mother was the only one who understood her pain. She painted herself as the victim, the tragic heroine who had only tried to do the right thing and had been cruelly punished for it. There was not a single sentence of remorse, not a single word acknowledging the pain she had caused. It was a masterclass in narcissism. I read the whole thing, my face impassive. When I was done, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt nothing at all. The person who wrote that letter was a stranger to me. The sister I had loved, or thought I had loved, was a phantom, a story I had told myself. The real Clara was this person, the one who saw love as a transaction and family as a stage for her own dramas. I stood up, walked over to the fireplace, and dropped the letter into the flames. I watched as the paper curled and blackened, her angry words turning to ash and smoke. Mark came and stood behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. We watched the last of it disappear. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was the absolute truth. "I'm really okay." She hadn't learned a thing. She hadn't grown or reflected or found an ounce of empathy. But I had. I had learned that my peace was worth fighting for. I had learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect and trust and safety. I had learned to build my own fences and stand guard at my own gate. Clara hadn't learned to be a better person. She had only learned that her manipulations now had consequences she couldn't control. She had finally learned what it feels like to be on the outside, looking in at a life she had tried and failed to destroy. And I was no longer going to hold the door open for her. The fire in the hearth burned warm and bright, and in our quiet, happy home, we were finally free.